Welcome back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video. This is another topic or response video to Vince's topic of the week on scenarios and their importance in Age of Sigmar. How do we feel about them? What are other games that maybe do them well? And so, first off, I wanted to say, just real simply, I enjoy scenarios. I think that they add a lot to the game. Different ways to play the game to keep the game fresher, other than just lining up for a pitch battle, which there's nothing wrong with. I enjoy pitch battles. Probably the majority of the strategy tabletop games that I've ever played, from Mech Warrior until now, have been predominantly pitch battles. But in Age of Sigmar, it's clear that GW really cares. In Balance of Power, for example, which I've done a review series on, and Victor has done a review series on, which I will link his channel in the description below. In the Balance of Power book, there are a lot of scenarios in it. Basically, as you flip through it, every few pages, there's a scenario that's tied into the narrative that is unfolding. So you get a few scenarios with each of the different factions that are covered within the book, which is the majority of the factions that have currently been, to some extent, talked about in the Age of Sigmar. And they're pretty good. I like them. They definitely help to make units that might not necessarily be truly viable within a battle lines type game. They give them a lot more value, or at least they can give them a lot more value depending on the scenario that you're playing. And like I said earlier, it just keeps the game fresh, and that's that's important, especially if you are someone who is able to get in a lot more games than I personally am. I'm definitely more of the aspiring gamer. I probably honestly only get in maybe 2 to 3 games a month. Obviously, I wish I could do more, but that's just what my schedule currently allows for. Another game that does scenarios really well, and I won't go into too much depth on this, but Age of Sigmar borrows heavily from this game, and I do have plans to do a short series, kind of talking about some of the scenarios from this game that you can easily adapt for Age of Sigmar to allow for a little bit more variance. Is the Lord of the Rings game. Ever since the very first rulebook, which I have right here, whenever the game launched, whenever the Fellowship of the Ring movie came out, scenarios were a huge part of the game. As the game developed and got into its later editions, they had the the kind of standard scenarios. Like if you're familiar with 40k in the main rulebook, there's a section where you can basically decide, do you want to do an Altar of War or the card-based scenario. I can't remember off the top of my head what that's called. I'm losing it now. But you could choose that, and then you could roll to see which of the ones that you got. And then you have, for example, in the card-based ones, that you have the different objectives each turn that you flip over to see what you get. And those kind of like regular, generic scenarios that you can do a lot with. Those became a thing in these later army books. But originally, you had lots of scenarios that were very much driven by the narrative. For example, you have here the scenario of Amen Hen, which, if you've seen the movies, is the scene whenever the Fellowship kind of breaks apart in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, and Boromir sells his life to defend the halflings. And especially in a game like Lord of the Rings that is based upon a narrative from both a film series and a book series, quite clearly narrative is incredibly important. Now in Age of Sigmar, clearly the narrative is important. It helps to drive everything, but Age of Sigmar and Warhammer the game really created the universe, or led to the creation of the universe, not the other way around. So do I think that scenarios are absolutely necessary for the game? No. The game is fun enough to be played in just pitch battle. Just kill your opponent. The rules work well enough for that. It's like that's what came first, right? Was the game. And really, if you have any experience with skirmish level games prior to, Age of Sigmar, or as you play more Age of Sigmar, then even your, pitched battles will not really feel like the traditional like clash of like shield walls like you had so much more of in the older editions of Warhammer Fantasy. In most skirmish level games, you have a lot more movement of individual models. You don't have, just the lineup and smash and then a little bit of flanking kind of things. Like there's a lot more variance into how the units actually get into combat with each other. Like Helm's Deep is a perfect example from Lord of the Rings film. Like in skirmish level games, you have a lot more of that. Like the troops are truly like mixed in, and there's the potential for those, kind of like random crazy brawls where everyone's just mixed amongst each other. That being said, while scenarios are not needed for the game to be playable and for the game to be fun, they definitely add a lot to the game. And story is important. If you watched Vince's topic from last week in the response videos, at least what I saw, from the majority of the responses was that narrative is very important. It's how you connect to the game beyond something like Monopoly, or Risk, or several other board games out there, and it's what helps differentiate the game. And the scenarios, as well as the unique named characters, are another way that you can connect with the game on a different level. But that's all for this one. Until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.